Commander Derek Hayes sat in the observation room of the research station, staring at the screen that showed an impossible signal. The signal had been repeating for 3 days now, growing stronger with each passing hour, and it came from deep space where no human ships were supposed to exist. The transmission pattern was old, degraded, but still broadcasting with the kind of desperation that made Derek's heart race. He had seen many strange things in his 20 years of service, but nothing quite like this. The signal was a distress call, the kind that belonged to ancient times when humanity first ventured beyond their own solar system. Derek recognized the encoding format, the specific modulation that no other species in the galaxy used. It was unmistakably human, yet the ship sending it had supposedly been destroyed 40 years ago when the colonial expedition to the Kepler sector had failed. There were no survivors, or so the records claimed. There had been no ships, no refugees, no hope. And yet here was the signal, crying out into the dark void of space, like a ghost seeking acknowledgement. Derek leaned forward and increased the volume. The message became clearer, more urgent. Thousands of voices mixed together, desperate pleas for help, frantic requests for any ship in range to respond. Children crying in the background. Parents trying to comfort them. Someone screaming that the power was failing, that the engines would not respond. Derek felt his stomach tighten. He had heard recordings of disasters before, had seen the footage of colonies falling to unknown threats, but this was different. This was raw, immediate, and worst of all, it could not exist. He pressed the communication button and called down to the analysis team. Within minutes, Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell appeared in the doorway, her dark eyes sharp with curiosity. She had worked with Derek for 5 years and had learned to read his expressions like a book. Something important had happened, and she could see it in the way he held himself. Derek gestured for her to sit and played the signal again. As Sarah listened, her expression changed from calm professionalism to shocked disbeliefs. Sarah reached out and grabbed Derek's arm. "This is impossible," she whispered. "This ship was lost. It was destroyed before it could even establish the colony. The records are clear. There are no survivors. There cannot be survivors." Derek nodded slowly. "That is what makes this so complicated," he said. "We have a distress call from a ship that does not exist, broadcasting from a location that should be completely empty space. We have thousands of people crying for help, and we have to make a choice about what we do next." The choice was harder than it sounded. If Derek reported this to the galactic authorities, if he revealed that he had heard this signal, questions would be asked. Questions about how a human research station could exist in neutral space. Questions about why humans were hiding out here. Questions about what humanity really was and what they were capable of. For 300 years, humans had kept themselves secret from the greater galaxy. They had limited their expansion, hidden their colonies, and pretended to be nothing more than a small primitive species interested only in their own development. The revelation of a hidden fleet, or worse, a hidden survivor population, could change everything. But if Derek did not report the signal, if he ignored the desperate pleas of thousands of innocent people, he would be condemning them to death. He would be choosing the safety of humanity's secret over the lives of refugees who had no one else to help them. Derek had become a military officer because he believed in protecting those who could not protect themselves. He had spent his entire career serving humanity, and now that service was asking him to make an impossible decision. Sarah was watching him carefully. "We could report to Admiral Rivera," she suggested quietly. "She runs the hidden command. If anyone can make this decision, it would be her. She has authority to activate protocols that we cannot even access." Derek considered this. Admiral Grace Rivera was the commander of the Sleeper Fleet, the ancient ships that humanity had built and hidden decades ago. She had the power to mobilize humanity's military resources, but she also understood the cost of such an action. Waking the fleet would expose humanity to the entire galaxy. It would reveal that humans were not the peaceful, simple species they had always claimed to be. Derek pulled up the communication system and began typing out a secure message to the hidden command. He explained what he had found, what the signal contained, and why he believed it was genuine. He sent the data to the encrypted channels that connected only to the High Command. Then he and Sarah waited. The response came within an hour. It was short and direct. Stand by for further orders. Do not respond to signal. Do not reveal our presence. Maintain observation and analysis. But Derek knew that if he was sending this information up the chain of command, people above him were already making decisions. Somewhere in the depths of human-controlled space, alarms were sounding. Somewhere, admirals and generals were looking at the same data and asking the same impossible questions. The signal continued to broadcast. Thousands of voices crying out into the darkness, unaware that help was coming, or that their salvation might come at a cost that humanity was not ready to pay. As night fell across the research station, Derek stood alone in the observation room, listening to the signal fade in and out, listening to the desperation in every transmission. He did not know what would happen next, but he understood that something fundamental had shifted. Humanity's age of hiding was ending. The question was no longer whether to help these people, but how to help them without destroying everything that humanity had built in secret for 3 centuries. The weight of that question settled on his shoulders like gravity itself, and Derek Hayes understood that his life, the hidden command, was located 700 kilometers beneath the surface of an asteroid that appeared on no star charts. It was protected by layers of rock and metal, hidden by technology so advanced that even the most sophisticated scanners in the galaxy could not detect it. Admiral Grace Rivera sat in the command center, reading Derek's report for the 3rd time, her weathered face showing no emotion. She had expected this day would come eventually. All her life, she had been preparing for the moment when humanity's secret would be exposed to the stars. Grace had been born into military service. Her mother had been a captain in the Hidden Fleet, and her father had been a weapons designer who created the ships that now lay dormant in the secure hangars. She had never questioned her duty. She had never doubted her purpose. She was meant to protect humanity, and when the moment came, she would be ready. That moment was now. She pressed a button on her desk and spoke into the communication system. All senior commanders to the command center immediately. Activate Protocol 7 Alpha. I want status reports from every section of the fleet within the hour. The response was immediate and professional. Yes, Admiral. Standing by for your orders. Within 30 minutes, the command center was filled with officers, some of them awakening from cryo-sleep for the first time in decades. They looked confused and disoriented, their minds still trying to adjust to the sudden transition from dreamless sleep to full alertness. They had been frozen in time, waiting for a moment that seemed like it would never come, and now that moment had arrived. They took their positions at the ancient control stations that still hummed with barely contained power. Grace addressed them with the calm authority of someone who had trained for this her entire life. 40 years ago, the colony ship that was supposed to establish human presence in the Kepler sector was attacked and reportedly destroyed. Today, we have received a distress signal from that region, and it appears that thousands of survivors are still alive and in need of rescue. The question before us is not whether we will help them, but how we will do so without triggering a conflict with the alien powers that currently control that region. One of the commanders, a tall man named William Peterson, raised his hand. Admiral, if we mobilize the fleet, the entire galaxy will know we exist. Our 300 years of hiding will be for nothing. We need to consider the consequences. Grace nodded. I understand your concerns, Commander, and they are valid. However, We did not build this fleet to remain hidden in caves for eternity. We built it to protect those who could not protect themselves. We built it to serve justice in the universe. If we turn away from those survivors now, we turn away from everything we claim to believe in. She walked to the main display, where a three-dimensional map of the galaxy was projected. She pointed to the region where the signal was originating. Intelligence reports suggest that the Vex Dominion has been conducting operations in this area. They enslave species and strip worlds for resources. They are brutal and efficient, and they have no mercy for those who cannot defend themselves. The survivors on that ship have no one else to turn to. We are their only hope. William looked at the map, at the vast distances that separated the hidden command from the location of the distress signal. The journey alone will take weeks. We will be exposed the entire time. Grace smiled sadly. Then we will make that journey with our eyes open, knowing what we are risking. But we will make it nonetheless. Wake the entire fleet. Full weapons, full crews, full power. I want every ship ready to move within 6 hours. The command center exploded into activity. Officers rushed to their stations and began shouting orders. The hum of power that had filled the space became a roar as the ancient systems came online. Deep in the hangars, massive ships that had not moved in decades began to wake up. Their engines, frozen in dormancy, rumbled back to life. The ships that humanity had built in secret, the weapons of a hidden civilization, were about to step into the light. Derek received the news an hour later. He was summoned to a secure communication line, and Admiral Rivara herself spoke to him. Her voice was calm and steady, but Derek could hear the weight of decision in every word. Commander Hayes, you will maintain observation of the distress signal and provide updated coordinates to our fleet as we move toward the rescue location. You will coordinate with our ships and ensure that the refugees are prepared for evacuation. You are now acting as the liaison between the research station and the sleeper fleet. The fate of these people depends on you. Derek swallowed hard. Yes, Admiral. I understand. What should I tell the other personnel here about what is happening? Grace paused for a moment. Tell them that humanity is about to change its place in the galaxy. Tell them that from this moment forward, we are no longer hiding. Tell them that we are moving into the light, and whatever comes next, we will face it together. The communication ended, and Derek stood in the observation room, looking out at the stars and the distant signal that had started all of this. Somewhere out there, a fleet of human ships was awakening. Somewhere in the darkness, thousands of people were about to discover that they were not alone, that help was coming, that humanity existed and was willing to risk everything to save them. Derek understood that this moment was the hinge upon which history would turn. On one side was the old world, where humans hid in shadows. On the other side was the new world, where humanity would stand openly among the stars. He picked up the communication device and began sending the updated coordinates to Admiral Rivera's fleet. The human fleet emerged from jump space with the grace of a predator stepping out of tall grass. 300 ships, each one a marvel of human engineering, moved into formation with the precision of a single organism. They were massive, dwarfing the smaller vessels that belonged to the alien species that controlled this sector. They were beautiful and terrible, and they announced their presence to every scanner in the region with unapologetic clarity. The Galactic Council received the news within minutes. Emergency sessions were called. Representatives from 100 different species gathered to discuss what they were seeing. A new fleet, unknown to any power in the galaxy, had just emerged in the disputed regions of the Kepler sector. The intelligence was transmitted across the stars, faster than light itself could travel, through quantum channels that existed in spaces between spaces. By the time the human ships had completed their first tactical maneuver, The entire galaxy knew that something unprecedented had occurred. Admiral Rivera stood on the bridge of the flagship, a ship called the Valiant, and watched the sensor displays. The Vex Dominion had been detected, a small force of 30 military vessels, but they were armed and ready. They had been pursuing the refugee ship with grim determination, intent on capturing the survivors for the slave markets of the outer territories. They were not expecting to encounter a human fleet. In fact, they did not know that humans existed in any significant numbers anywhere in the galaxy. Commander Derek Hayes watched from the research station as the battle began. The sensor data was compressed and transmitted directly to his console, and he found himself witnessing history unfold in real time. The human ships did not open fire immediately. Instead, they moved, executing maneuvers that seemed almost impossible. Tactical formations that took advantage of three-dimensional space in ways that most alien navies had not even considered. The Vex Commander, a being whose name translated roughly as Hollow Death in the human language, issued orders to his fleet. His ships moved to intercept the unknown vessels. They had superior numbers in this initial exchange, and they were confident in their weapon systems. Hollow Death had crushed a dozen rebellions and destroyed entire fleets. He did not fear these newcomers, but the human ships were different. They moved with a coordination that seemed to anticipate the Vex movements before they happened. When Hollow Death ordered his vessels to advance, the human fleet retreated, drawing the Vex forces into a configuration that would be disadvantageous for their longer-range weapons. The human ships circled, weaving between the Vex vessels like wolves circling a herd of prey. Then, suddenly, they struck. The first salvo of human weapons fire tore through a Vex battleship. The shields, designed to withstand conventional energy weapons, could not cope with the plasma dynamics that the human navy had engineered. The ship erupted in secondary explosions, its reactor failing catastrophically. Within seconds, another Vex vessel had been disabled, and a third was spinning away with its communications. A ray-destroyed Hollow Death realized too late that he had been outmaneuvered. The human fleet, far from being disorganized or inexperienced, was one of the most coordinated fighting forces he had ever encountered. He issued a retreat order, but it was too late. The human ships moved to intercept, cutting off escape routes with methodical precision. When the battle was over, less than 5 minutes had passed. Hollow Death's fleet was in shambles, with 12 ships destroyed and 8 more crippled. The human fleet had not lost a single vessel. Derek watched the numbers on his screen, barely believing what he was seeing. Humanity had just defeated a major military power without suffering a single casualty. Across the galaxy, ambassadors from alien species were scrambling to respond. The Galactic Council was demanding answers. Who were these humans? Where did they come from? And what did they want? The answer came quickly. Admiral Rivera herself sent a transmission to the Galactic Council and to every listening post in known space. Her voice was calm and authoritative, the voice of someone who had never doubted her right to speak. I am Admiral Grace Rivera of the human fleet. We have emerged from hiding to save those who could not save themselves. We have no quarrel with the peaceful peoples of this galaxy, but we will defend the innocent from those who would prey upon them. We are humanity, and we will no longer hide our light. The statement reverberated through the galaxy. Within hours, media outlets were broadcasting the news. Within days, every species in the known universe was aware that humanity existed and that humanity was powerful. The galactic balance had shifted in an instant. Derek received a personal message from Admiral Rivera. It said simply, "The age of hiding is over. Welcome to the new world." The refugee ship, having seen the human fleet arrive and destroyed the Vex forces that had been hunting it, sent out a transmission of thanks and hope. They were no longer alone. They had been rescued by a species that had proven its capability and its compassion. They had witnessed human ships choosing to protect them, choosing to fight against superior odds, choosing to do what was right regardless of the consequences. As night fell across the research station, Derek looked up at the stars and saw the human fleet in the sensor displays, moving steadily toward the refugee ship to begin rescue operations. He understood that he was witnessing the birth of a new era. Humanity's long silence was ending. The galaxy would never be the same, and everything that came next would flow from the choice that had. The Vex Dominion did not retreat far. They regrouped and summoned reinforcements from neighboring sectors, calling upon their allies and mercenary fleets to join them in destroying this new human threat before it could grow stronger. Within 3 days, a force of nearly 80 ships was converging on the refugee vessel. They came from a dozen different species and 100 different mercenary organizations, drawn together by the promise of profit and the desire to crush a rising power before it could establish itself. Admiral Rivera received the intelligence reports and understood the situation immediately. The refugee ship was failing, its life support systems barely functional, its power reserves nearly depleted. The survivors had only days before the ship would become a tomb of darkness and cold. They could not wait for reinforcements, and they could not count on the Vex and their allies simply accepting defeat. Derek was transferred to the fleet and given command of a boarding team. 20 soldiers, all of them trained in rescue operations and combat, would descend to the refugee ship under the cover of human fighter squadrons. Their mission was to evacuate as many survivors as possible before the approaching forces arrived. It was a simple mission with incredibly complex consequences. The refugee ship hung in space like a wounded animal, its hull scarred and dark, its systems failing one by one. Derek led his team through the boarding tunnel that the human vessels had extended to create a docking bridge. The gravity in the refugee ship was failing, and the darkness was almost total. The only light came from the illumination systems on the soldiers' armor. They moved through the corridors like ghosts. Following the heat signatures of the survivors, Derek found the first group of refugees huddled in what had once been a cargo bay. They were terrified, their eyes wide with fear, their bodies thin and weak from months of ration supplies. They had thought that death was coming, that the pursuing ships would catch them and drag them away to slavery or worse. Now, seeing human soldiers in full combat armor, they did not know whether to feel hope or additional fear. Derek removed his helmet so they could see his face. He spoke in a calm, steady voice. "I am Commander Derek Hayes of the human military. We are here to rescue you. I need everyone who is capable of moving to follow us immediately. We have limited time, and we need to get you to safety." An older man, his name was Marcus, stepped forward. He had been the captain of the refugee ship before the engines had failed. "How many can you take, Commander?" "There are 4,000 survivors on this vessel, scattered throughout different sections. Many are sick, many are elderly, many are children." Derek's heart sank. His team could transport maybe 200 people in the first evacuation wave, perhaps 300 if they pushed the shuttle capacity to its limits. That left thousands behind. He could not abandon them, but he also could not save them all at once. He made his decision immediately. "We will move everyone we can to the upper docking bay. We will evacuate in waves. Those who are capable of moving will go first. Then we return for the others. I will not leave anyone behind if I can help it." The refugee captain nodded, and within minutes, survivors began moving through the ship, following Derek's soldiers toward the docking bay. Above them, the human fleet was engaging the approaching Vex forces. The battle raged across the black expanse of space, human ships trading fire with the enemy Armada. Buying time for the evacuation below, Derek moved through the ship with his team, helping the weak and the injured to their feet, carrying children when they were too small to move on their own. The soldiers worked with efficiency and compassion, understanding that these people were the reason they had come to this place, the reason they had revealed themselves to the galaxy. They were not just rescuing refugees. They were proving that humanity was worth something more than military power. They were proving that humanity could be trusted with lives. The first wave of evacuees boarded the shuttle and launched for the fleet. Derek coordinated with the second and third waves, moving constantly through the failing ship, always aware that the enemy forces were drawing closer. The sensor reports showed Vex ships accelerating toward them. They had minutes, maybe less. Admiral Rivara sent Derek a message. "We cannot hold the line much longer, Commander. You need to evacuate the remaining survivors immediately." Derek was in one of the lowest sections of the ship, helping a group of sick and elderly refugees toward the docking bay. Many of them were barely conscious. Some were dying from malnutrition and illness. But they were alive, and Derek was determined to get them to safety. His soldiers formed a protective barrier around the refugees, moving them as quickly as possible through the corridors that were growing darker and colder by the minute. The refugee ship's power failed completely as Derek's team reached the docking bay. The gravity generators shut down, and everyone began floating in the weightlessness of space. It should have been a disaster, but the human soldiers were trained for this. They attached themselves to the refugees with tether lines, pulling them toward the shuttle, moving with the practiced efficiency of those who had trained for this exact scenario. As the final group was boarding the shuttle, an explosion rocked the entire ship. The Vex forces had launched a surprise attack, a bombardment designed to destroy the refugee vessel and eliminate the witnesses to their failure. The ship began to crumble around Derek. Walls collapsed, corridors filled with debris, the entire structure groaning under the stress of decompression and structural failure. Derek pulled the final elderly woman into the shuttle, just as the docking bay exploded. The shuttle detached and launched away from the dying ship, accelerating toward the human fleet as the refugee vessel behind them came apart in a spectacular display of destruction and light. But all 4,000 survivors were safe. Not a single refugee had been left behind. As Derek watched the refugee ship disappear into the void, he understood the price of what had been done. His team had risked everything, and they had all survived. The refugees had been saved. Humanity had proven that its military power was only one part of what made them strong. Compassion, dedication, and the willingness to sacrifice for others. These were the things that truly made humanity great above the battle. The human fleet continued its fight against the overwhelming enemy forces. They were taking casualties now, losing ships and lives, but they would not surrender. They could not surrender. Not when they had just saved 4,000 lives. Not when the final battle lasted 3 hours. The human fleet, facing an enemy force that outnumbered them nearly 3-1, held their ground with a determination that seemed to transcend military strategy. It was as if the sailors and soldiers of humanity's hidden Armada understood that they were fighting for something more than territory or resources. They were fighting for the right to exist openly in the galaxy. And they were fighting to prove that existence was worth the sacrifice. Admiral Grace Rivera commanded from the bridge of the Valiant, calmly issuing orders while explosions rocked the ship around her. She had lost 5 vessels and suffered damage to dozens more, but the Vex forces had lost 20 ships, with many others retreating after sustaining catastrophic damage. When the final Vex commander issued an order to withdraw, Admiral Rivera did not pursue. There was no need to. Humanity had proven its point, as the human fleet secured the sector and began salvage operations on the refugee ship. The Galactic Council issued a formal communication requesting immediate diplomatic negotiations with the human leadership. They wanted answers to 100 questions. But more importantly, They wanted to establish formal relations with this new power that had appeared on their doorstep. Ambassador Lisa Cohen was appointed by the human government to represent humanity before the Galactic Council. She was a brilliant diplomat, fluent in the languages of dozens of alien species, and possessed of a gift for seeing what others wanted even when they themselves did not understand it. She arrived at the council chambers in the neutral trading hub of Meridian Station 3 weeks after the final battle. And from the moment she entered the negotiation rooms, she changed the course of galactic history. Lisa did not come to the council demanding concessions or territories or wealth. Instead, she came with a simple proposition. Humanity asked for recognition as an equal member of the galactic community, with the right to maintain its own territories and governments. In exchange, humanity offered something that had been missing from galactic politics for centuries: a voice for justice and mercy, a species that would not tolerate the enslavement of innocent people, a civilization that would serve as a shield for those who could not protect themselves. The Council was skeptical at first. They had dealt with many species, many civilizations, many powers. They had learned that everyone wanted something. Everyone had hidden agendas. Everyone could be bought or threatened or coerced into serving someone else's interests. But humanity was different. It had proven its military capability, and now it was proving its commitment to principles that transcended simple greed over the course of 3 months. Lisa negotiated formal treaties that established humanity's place in the galaxy. Human space was recognized as sovereign territory. Human vessels would have the right to travel freely through all neutral zones, and humanity would be granted a seat on the Galactic Council with full voting rights. More importantly, Lisa established protocols for cooperation on humanitarian missions. Human ships would work together with other species to protect trade routes, to prevent slavery, and to provide aid to civilizations that have been struck by disaster. Humanity became, in a sense, the conscience of the galaxy, the voice that would not allow others to forget about the innocent and the weak. Derek stood on the observation platform of the refugee station, watching as the survivors from the ancient ship began their new lives. They had been provided with temporary housing, medical care, and the support they needed to rebuild. Many of them had asked to join the human military, to become part of the fleet that had saved them. Others had chosen to pursue different paths, but all of them had been given a choice, and all of them had been treated with dignity and respect. The refugee captain, Marcus, approached Derek one evening. The old man's face was lined with age and exhaustion, but there was light in his eyes that had not been there before. "Commander Hayes, I wanted to thank you," Marcus said. "You risked your life to save us, even when it would have been easier to leave us behind." Derek shook his head. "We did what was right, Captain." "That is what humanity is supposed to do," Marcus smiled. "Then humanity is a great species indeed. I have lived among many civilizations, and I have never seen a power strong enough to do what is right when doing the wrong thing would be easier. Your people have given us something precious. They have given us hope. In the months that followed, humanity's role in the galaxy grew stronger. Human engineers worked with other species to rebuild damaged worlds. Human doctors shared their medical knowledge freely. Human explorers mapped new regions of space and shared the information with those who needed it. Humanity became known not just as a military power, but as a civilization of builders, healers, and protectors. Admiral Grace Rivara retired from active service and became the head of the new Human Colonial Authority, a position that allowed her to oversee the expansion of human civilization throughout the galaxy. She established schools, hospitals, and research centers, always with the understanding that these institutions would serve not just humans, but any species that needed help. Derek was promoted to captain and given command of a new starship, the Herald of Hope, with a specific mission to patrol the outer regions of explored space and provide aid to any civilization that requested it. It was not the kind of command that came with great glory or historical significance. But it was, Derek believed, the most important work a human being could do. The refugee ship, which had started everything, was salvaged and refurbished. It became a floating memorial to the journey that had changed the galaxy, a reminder of the moment when humanity had chosen compassion over caution, had chosen to reveal itself to save those who needed help. Ships from dozens of alien species would visit the memorial, paying respects to the refugees who had been saved and the humans who had taken the risk to save them at night. Derek would stand on the bridge of the Herald of Hope and look out at the stars. He thought about the young man he had been, listening to a distress signal in a dark observation room, wondering whether to report it or remain silent. He was grateful that he had chosen to report it, grateful that Admiral Rivera had chosen to wake the fleet, grateful that humanity had decided to step into the light. The galaxy was changing. Slowly, other species began to follow humanity's example, began to care more about protecting the innocent and less about accumulating power. Conflicts were resolved through negotiation rather than warfare. The enslaved were freed. The hungry were fed. And across the stars, civilizations began to work together rather than against each other. Humanity's hidden armada had awakened not to conquer, but to serve. And in serving, they had transformed not just their own place in the